guess you perhaps already noticed that the scenario changed for this video. For this video and perhaps for the future videos, we'll see. And today the content of the video will be also different. Basically, we'll only have whispering sounds. Whispering, no, not sounds, but I'll basically just read today for you. And for that I picked a classic book. Which is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And without further ado, because I want my voice to be in the background of whatever you're doing at the moment, or if you're trying to sleep, we will start the whispering session, the reading session. I hope you enjoy. I'll read. I chose this book because I wanted a chapter or something that makes sense from the beginning to the end and not just read something random from a random book. So yeah, we'll read chapter 4 of this book. Let's begin. Chapter 4, like this. Chapter 4, an easy way to become a good conversationalist. Some time ago, I attended a bridge party. I don't play bridge, and there was a woman there who didn't play bridge either. She had discovered that I had once been Lowell Thomas' manager before he went on the radio, and that I had traveled in Europe a great deal with helping him prepare the illustrated travel talks he was then delivering. So she said, "Oh, Mr. Carnegie, I do want you to tell me about all the wonderful places you have visited and the sights you have seen." As we sat down on the sofa, she remarked that she and her husband had recently returned from a trip to Africa. "Africa," I exclaimed. "How interesting. I've always wanted to see Africa, but I never got there except for a 24-hour stay once in Algiers. Tell me, did you visit the big game country?" "Yes." "How fortunate. I invite you to tell me about Africa." That kept her talking for 45 minutes. She never again asked me where I had been or what I had seen. surprise. I told him that I had been immensely entertained and instructed, and I had. I told him I wished I had this knowledge, and I did. I told him that I should love to wander. The fields with him, and I have. I told him I must see him again, and I did. And so, I had him thinking of me as a good conversationalist when, in reality, I had been merely a good listener, and I had encouraged him to talk. What is the secret, the mystery of a successful business interview? Well, according to former Harvard president Charles Eliot, there is no mystery about successful business intercourse. Exclusive attention to the person who is speaking to you is very important. Nothing else is so flattering as that. Eliot himself was a base master of the art of listening. Henry James, one of America's first great novelists, recalled, Dr. Eliot's listening was not mere silence, but a form of activity. Sitting very erect on the end of his spine with hands joined in his lap, making no movement except that he revolved his thumbs around each other faster or slower, he faced his interlocutor and seemed to be hearing with his eyes as well as his ears. He listened with his mind and attentively considered what you had to say while you said it. At the end of an interview, the person who had talked with him felt that he had his say. Self-evident, isn't it? You don't have to study for 4 years in Harvard to discover that. Yet, I know and you know department store owners will rent expensive space, buy their goods economically, dress their windows appealing, spend thousands of dollars in advertising and then hire clerks who haven't seen the sense to be good listeners. Clerks who interrupt the customers, contradict them, irritate them, and all but drive them from the store. A department store in Chicago almost lost a regular customer who spent several $1,000s each year in that store because a sales clerk wouldn't listen. Mrs. Henrietta Douglas, who took our course in Chicago, had purchased a coat at a special sale. After she had brought him home, she noticed that there was a tear in the lining. She came back the next day and asked the sales clerk to change it. The clerk refused even to listen to her complaint. "You bought this at a special sale," she said. She pointed out to a sign on the wall. "Read that," she exclaimed. "All sales are final. Once you bought it, you have to keep it. Sew up the lining yourself." Interesting so far. "But this was damaged merchandise," Mrs. Douglas complained. "Makes no difference," the clerk interrupted. "Final's final." Mrs. Douglas was about to walk out indignantly, swearing never to return to that store ever, when she was greeted by the department manager, who knew her from her many years of patronage. Mrs. Douglas told her what had happened. The manager listened attentively to the whole story, examined the coat, and then said, Special sales are final. So we can dispose of merchandise at the end of the season. But this no return policy does not apply to damaged goods. We will certainly repair or replace the lining, or if you prefer, give you your money back. What a difference in treatment. If that manager had not come along and listened to the customer, a long-term patron of that store would have been lost forever. Listening is just as important in one's home life as in the world of business. Millie Esposito of Croton-on-Hudson, New York, made it her business to listen carefully when one of her children wanted to speak with her. One evening, she was sitting in the kitchen with her son, Robert, and after a brief discussion of something that was on his mind, Robert said, "Mom, I know I know that you love me very much." Mrs. Exposito was touched and said, "Of course I love you very much. Did you doubt it?" Robert responded, "No, but I really know you love me because whenever I talk to you about something, you stop whatever you're doing and listen to me." The chronic kicker, even the most violent critic, will frequently soften and be soothed in the presence of a patient's sympathetic listener. A listener who will be silent while the irate fault finder dilates like a king cobra and spews the poison out of his system. To illustrate, the New York telephone company discovered a few years ago that it had to deal with one of the most vicious customers who ever cursed a customer service representative. And he did curse. He raved. He threatened to tear the phone out by its roots. He refused to pay certain charges that he declared were false. He wrote letters to newspapers. He filed innumerable complaints with the Public Service Commission, and he started several suits against the telephone company. At last, one of the company's most skillful troubleshooters was sent to interview this stormy petrel. This troubleshooter listened and let the cantankerous consumer enjoy himself pouring out of his tirade. The telephone representative listened and said yes and sympathized with his grievance. He raved on and listened for nearly 3 hours. The troubleshooter said as he related his experiences before one of the other classes. Then I went back and listened some more. I interviewed him 4 times, and before the 4th visit was over, I had become a charter member of an organization he was starting. He called it Telephone Subscribers Protective Association. I am still a member of this organization, and so far as I know, I am the only member in the world today besides Mr. I listened and sympathized with him on every point that he had made during these interviews. He had never had a telephone representative talk with him that way before, and he became almost friendly. The point on which I went to see him was not even mentioned on the first visit, nor was it mentioned on the 2nd or 3rd, but upon the 4th interview. One of the great listeners of modern times was Sigmund Freud, a man who met Freud described his manner of listening. It struck me so forcibly that I shall never forget him. He had qualities which I had never seen in any other man. Never had I seen such concentrated attention. There was none of the piercing, soul-penetrating gaze business. His eyes were mild and genial. His voice was low and kind. His gestures were few, but the attention he gave me, his appreciation of what I said, even when I said it badly, was extraordinary. You have no idea what it meant to be listened to like that. If you want to know how to make people shun you and laugh at you behind your back and even despise you, here is the recipe. Never listen to anyone for long. Talk intensely about yourself. If you have an idea while the other person is talking, don't wait for him or her to finish. Bust right in and interrupt in the middle of a sentence. Do you know people like that? I do, unfortunately. And the astonishing part of it is that some of them are prominent. Bores, that is all they are. Bores intoxicated with their own egos, drunk with the sense of their own importance. People who talk only of themselves, think only of them. And those people who think only of themselves, Dr. Nicholas Murray Butler, longtime president of Columbia University, said, quoting, "are hopelessly uneducated. They are not educated, no matter how instructed they may be." So, if you aspire to be a good conversationalist, be an attentive listener. To be interesting, be interested. Ask questions that other persons will enjoy answering. Encourage them to talk about themselves and their accomplishments. Remember that the people you are talking to are 100 times interested in themselves and their wants and problems than they are in you and your problems. A person's toothache means more to that person than a famine in China, which kills 1 million people. A boil in one's neck interests one more than 40 earthquakes in Africa. Think of that the next time you start a conversation. Principle number 4. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. And with these, we conclude chapter 4 of the book How to Win Friends and Influence People. Basically a book about, a chapter about listening to people and the importance of showing empathy and the importance of asking questions and genuine interest in what the other